Thanks, Mike. Let's dive into automating and integrating Rubrik using APIs. My name is Jaap. I'm a developer advocate at Rubrik, and I'm interested in scripting, APIs, anything automation related, really. And today I'm also joined by Frederik. Frederik is a Rubrik customer and also an API and automation enthusiast. So I think when we talk about Rubrik and our API, there's a number of use cases that come to mind. So for example, you might want to verify and validate that your backups are actually going to be recoverable. Another big use case is disaster recovery. I mean, if anything goes particularly wrong, we want to make sure that we have an automated process that can help us recover our data at the most critical times. And then there's also test dev scenarios where you might want to spin up an environment either for a project or to test out a new deployment using production data. And we also have Rubrik Build, and Rubrik Build is our open source community platform on which we have a number of different resources available. So here it doesn't matter if you're an automation expert, you're an API developer and you want to consume our API. If that is the case, then we have API documentation available. On the other hand, you might be interested in seeing what is possible and what kind of use cases are out there. And for that, we have our use cases. And for anything in between, we have tooling and integration. So for example, configuration management using Ansible, or if you want to start scripting, we have a PowerShell SDK available. One of the projects listed is also the PHP framework. And for that, I would like to hand it over to Frederik.
Thank you, Jaap, and thank you, Mike. So my name is Frederik Lawest. I'm a technology architect at PCCW Global, and I'm passionate about technology. PCCW Global is a leading international communication service provider offering the latest mobility, voice, and data solutions to multinational enterprises, telecommunications partner, cloud, and application service provider. We became a Rubrik customer about 3 years ago because Rubrik is simplifying the data security process and offload our IT teams. And this is very valuable with a short staff team like we have in PCCW Global. Also, as a telecommunication company, we need to archive a certain type of data for at least 7 years. And this is challenging to manage those archives. Rubrik is bringing a lot of next-gen features, and automation is definitely one of them. So again, why automation? Simply because anything a computer can do on my behalf is a great step forward. As most of the IT guys, I'm a lazy guy, and that's why I'm passionate about automation. So I will talk about automation with Rubrik. I will talk about the language that I'm using, so PHP. I will talk about my framework. I will go through different examples so you get a practical, let's say, application of what we can do. I will show you some demo and I will speak about what's the future of it. Automation with Rubrik. So Rubrik provides many ways to interact with the cluster. Not only the UI, the CDN, but of course REST API, because this is how we're going to automate. So out of the box, you have a Go SDK, you have a PowerShell SDK, and you have a Python SDK. It is also compatible with different tools like Ansible. You have the API Explorer, which is provided by Rubrik out of the box, and you have some Terraform implementation as well. All these can be seen on the Rubrik Build website that Jaap just mentioned. So why automation with PHP? The first obvious answer to that is because I'm a Mac user and I don't have PowerShell. I don't know anything about Python, and I'm comfortable with PHP for years and years, and I'm already using it a lot for many various things and administration scripts for different type of scenarios. Many people think that PHP is built for creating dynamic websites, It is true, but it's obviously not the only use case. You can use PHP for many different things. You can address many different purposes, like accessing an LDAP server, creating users, manipulating files, and many different stuff. So I'm using the PHP CLI, which is the command line interface version of PHP. And the good thing is it works on many platforms. So as I said, I'm a Mac user, but it works, of course, on Linux, it works on Windows, Raspberry, Raspbian, Spark, and many different operating systems. So let's go PHP. But before that, I'd like to mention that I'm not a developer, I'm a system admin. And I'm only trying to make a good use of what I know to achieve my goals and my different challenges. So anything you will see is probably not proper code, but at least it works. So let's code a little bit. I first try to connect to the REST API endpoint with this very simple query. I was actually trying to get the cluster capacity, and you can go there with the disk capacity endpoint in the API Explorer provided by Rubrik, but you can see here it is translated into a PHP function. The birth of the framework. I was actually trying to create users on each and every Rubrik cluster that we have in the company, and it was taking a lot of time. So I thought maybe we can automate that process. And indeed, we can automate the process using API calls. So I tried a couple of tests, and I quickly got a couple of functions, and I decided to create a kind of collection to reuse them easily on different various scripts. And then this is how the framework is born. The first release was in November 2018 with 10 functions, and I was doing regular addition, days after days. And today we have a total of 89 functions on various topics about users, of course, about snapshots, Nutanix, IHV VMs, VMware VMs, SQL, whatever. There's many topics in the framework. So it's maintained, and I'm trying to keep it aligned with the recent Rubrik CDN releases, because of course, sometimes Rubrik is changing the endpoint and renamed the API call itself, so I need to adapt myself. But this is sometimes challenging because I'm doing this on my free time. I've published my framework on GitHub to help the community and to try to make it evolving. You can check out my Rubrik repository on GitHub. So a basic script project is composed of a minimum of 3 files. You have the credential files, where you are actually telling the script to connect to what cluster with what credentials. You have the, of course, PHP framework itself, and then you have your code. And in your code, you are including those 2 files. Example number 1. In this example, we are getting the basic cluster information like the name, the version which is running, and the SLA, available space, etc., etc. So it's sometimes useful to validate that your script is running correctly. You will see that in the demo. Example number 2 is about the loading SQL DB files. So that one is used when, for example, your main SQL server is completely dead and you need to migrate the data on another server or even in the cloud. So what you can do, you can use that script to ask Rubrik to download the DB files. You will get that as a zip file, and you can then easily import them into a brand new SQL server. Example number 3 is about the backup integrity check, as Jaap mentioned before. So that one is a brand new feature of Rubrik CDN 5.3, the winter release. And today there is no way to use that feature from the Rubrik UI. You need to do API calls. So the Powershell SDK is provided with a couple of functions related to that. But I thought it was interesting to add these into my framework so I can make good use of my backup integrity check by myself. Now let's jump into a quick demo. Here is my demo environment. It is a Rubrik Edge appliance. I have a couple of VMs, vSphere VMs. There we go. I also have a couple of SQL DBs. We have 4 DBs. And of course, SLAs to protect these objects. Looking at the code, remember, we need 3 files. The first one is the framework itself, where you have all the functions. Then you need the credential files to tell the script what cluster to connect with what credentials. And in your script itself, you need to include those 2 files. So let's have a look at the first script, which is the cluster info. Okay, cluster info. So I'm getting some basic cluster information such as the name, the version, and the capacity, as well as the different SLAs that we have configured, the available space, and the cluster runway, and some interesting figures about the snapshots that we have ingested. So let's quickly come back to the cluster and let's have a look at the SLAs. So let's say that we are deleting the test SLA, and let's run the script again to see if there is any difference. So obviously we are expecting the test SLA to be gone, which is the case. So with that, I can assure you that it's a real API call each time we are running the script. So it's a live demo. Example number 2. Download SQL files. So this script is actually asking the Rubrik cluster to get the DB files of the latest snapshot of a given DB. In my example, we're going to work on the Adventure Works and the model DBs. Let's have a look. Okay, download SQL. So this one is an asynchronous script. The first part is asking the Rubrik cluster to prepare the files that I need. And the second part of the script is actually downloading the files that have been prepared. It's gonna take a couple of seconds. The first DB is 200 megs, and the second one is quicker. So let's have a look at the target directory. So the first file is ready. Let's wait for the second one. There we go. So now we have 2 files. And if we look inside, let's say the second one is smaller, it will be faster. So inside the zip, we have a folder called model, because in this case, it's the name of the DB. Inside that folder, we have another one with the snapshot date and time for our reference. And inside that folder, we have the real files. So we have the MDF, the data file, and the LDF, the transaction log files. Then it's very easy to import those 2 files using a SQL Studio into a brand new SQL instance. So that's it for example 2. Now, example number 3 is the backup verification. So we are telling to our script that we would like to verify the integrity of the backup of CentOS VM1. So let's go. Again, we have an asynchronous script. The first step is to tell Rubrik to check for the integrity. And once completed, the second part of the script is actually getting the result. So this one is going to take about 2 minutes for that VM, so we can speed up the time a little bit. Okay, it is completed. So we see it took about 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and the result is passed. So it means we can make good use of that snapshot. So again, this is today the only way to use that brand new Rubrik feature. Of course, this is a very simple example, but you can imagine modifying the script and have a lot of backups verify at once in a massive loop. So you can automate your monthly backup checks, for example. So that's something maybe to try on. So what's next? Adding more function for other Rubrik topic, maybe about cloud, about archiving. There's many other topics that I need to make the framework evolve to. And of course, finishing the documentation. This is always a big challenge for IT guys to have documentation up to date and maintained. So this is not the case, so bear with me. I know I need to work on that. Also, I need to collaborate more with the community and see what can be done. Have many other developers, maybe other IDs. It's always nice to have more IDs. So thank you very much. Okay, back to you, Mike.